This episode is indeed the audience special. Tales from the Fireside, the audience special. I've got myself composed now. This is not a good way to start in a grumpy fashion. And tonight, friends, we're going to be sharing with you a number of tales that have been told to us by you wonderful people. And I'm very excited indeed to be sharing with you tonight an original story. Oh, we got another one. This one's even more angry than the last one. Mud. It's a different one now. You see, you ban one and 5 more come back. It's quite frustrating. Oh, and normally it's the ones that have got larger numbers on, 500, 600 people watching. They get hit with them. But they must have known that you'd be keen tonight. They were like, happy birthday, Dorian. We're going to give you some delicious spam for your birthday, which isn't the most delicious of things, truth be known. Yes, it is indeed the birthday. Apparently, I have survived 4 whole decades. Can you believe that? Are you ready? Can we come over to you, Mrs. D? Can we say hello to you? There she is. Hello there. How are you?
Sorry, I haven't got my microphone on.
You should have your microphone on. That sort of work. It works better if you have your microphone on.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dorian's 39th birthday, 40th birthday eve, where we will be reading some of your amazing stories that you sent us. They're so good. Some of them spooked me while I was reading them. So, yeah. I am here on my sofa. Wore a little stripy number for you tonight.
Looking very snazzy.
In the birthday spirit.
Very good. Very snazzy. So I went quiet there because I found the ban button, which they've moved. Give feedback and report. Spam. Next. And then my favourite one, banned. Banned. Banned.
Oh no.
I've gone mad with power.
He's gone mad with power.
I've gone mad with power. I've got my little birthday badge on. Is this why you asked me earlier on what colour would I like? Blue, red, silver?
Oh, that was for the hat.
Oh, it's for the hat. How many hats came in the pack?
Lots.
That's great stuff. Lovely stuff. So yes, we are going to be sharing tonight a number of stories. Now we have a few images. We got a video to share with you. Where's Dolores tonight? We need Dolores on the case.
Yeah.
She'd be all over this. Absolutely all over this. I think once we get into it a little bit, it should calm down. Who's the crew member stood in the doorway behind Mrs. D? Don't say things like that.
No, there's no doorway there.
Don't say things like that.
That's fine.
Friends, we realise that the spammers are very annoying, but just please try to ignore them, because I think the more, if we all start talking about the spammers loads for the whole stream, then it's not going to be particularly enjoyable to anybody. So just ignore them, and we'll ignore them. And let's just ignore it. Ignore it. We'll ban them silently as they come in. We'll try and keep on top of it. So, yes. How have you been, Mrs. D?
I've been great.
You've been good. How have you lot been out there on the internet? How have you all been on these cold and wet days? It's a bit of a change, isn't it?
It's been great as well.
We've gone from like crazy warm, incredibly sweaty weather to
crazy damp,
sweaty weather. Yeah. I mean, at least Yorkshire is quite consistent with how sweaty things are.
Yeah.
I have the big giant jug of beer out tonight.
The tankard. Ooh.
So where's this face I'm looking at? Where's this? There's a crew member stood behind me. Is it this fella?
I thought it said behind me.
Behind you? Is there a face in the darkness?
Oh.
I mean, I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest.
It's one of those Churchill noddy head dogs hiding down there in the background. But
yeah, that is a little bit frustrating, isn't it?
That's very scary.
Yeah, just lurking away in the background there. So we will be tonight sharing some of the stories that you've sent in to us, including a lovely original piece of writing. Now it's 1.5, I would say, 1.5 original pieces of writing. There's a story that's been sent in that's been written in a stylized fashion, which I'm a huge fan of, and then there's an original short story that's been written by somebody who at the moment chooses to remain anonymous. Hiccup. Anonymous. Anonymous. I've read through all the stories tonight, and some of them are quite chilling. The video that we're going to show you right at the top of the show tonight is very intriguing indeed. I think it's a very, very peculiar one. Paula McKillop, great name. Our son's middle name is Dorian. Excellent choice. Aww. Excellent choice. So I'm going to pop over to my good self now, And I'm going to leave Mrs. D in the corner to silently combat some spammers. Have you figured out how to give them the ban hammer? The 3 little dots, report, spam, block, and it's very satisfying. It's very satisfying.
But you go on, love.
Okay, I'll go on. So I think we'll open tonight with a little video that we've got. This is an interesting video. This was actually sent to us from a cinema in New York. Okay, so here we go. Now, just before I should go any further, the reason why we've chosen to do an audience special is simply because we got sent so many stories, absolutely flooded with wonderful stories, and we wanted to do something to share them with everybody. We wanted to make use of them all, but we got to a point where we got so many that we just didn't quite know what to do. So we decided to do this. We've done an entire episode dedicated to these lovely stories. So here we go. Now, the first one tonight is an interesting video, and it is sent over by a local cinema. Now, this local cinema, at the moment, is obviously, like many places, was hibernating. It was waiting to come back from its little break and to sort of reinvent itself and figure out how to safely return back to work. And they had CCTV cameras, which I believe were activated by motion. Is that correct, Mrs. D? Were they activated by? They just record all the time. Is that right?
The cameras are on all the time. It's the
cameras,
CCTV cameras.
Okay, so they're just on all the time, and they record constantly. But you've got a bit of a closer connection to this one than me. So would you like to introduce it?
Sure.
I'll pop you on the old. Hang on, let me just bring let me bring you back into the fold. There she is. Lovely.
Am I back?
You're back.
Hello. Okay, so over lockdown, the Everyman Cinema on Blossom Street has obviously not had staff in as often as usual because they were all furloughed. From time to time, a manager would go in, make sure everything's okay. Now, one thing to note is that before it got shut down, everything was emptied out. It was all empty. On the upstairs bar, there was a empty bin bag to cover up a shelf full of glasses so they didn't get dusty, and it was held in place by a heavy metal cup. And it had been there from March to the start of August. And this first week of August, one of the managers noticed that it was gone. So, because there's always been creepy stuff going on in that building, the manager went to look at the CCTV to see what happened.
Would you like to see that now?
Yeah, let's have a look.
So this is a recording, obviously, of a phone recording the screen, and you can see that there. That's the cup on the sheet. And you said that had been there for a very long time.
Yeah, a very long time, yeah, and not moved. And there's no wind or anything else that could have had an effect on it.
It's just there.
I'm popping around to you. Okay, so you can see there the metal cup is holding the bag down. Mm-hmm. And for some weird reason...
The weirdest thing, it looks like it's been slowly tugged from the bottom. It does, doesn't it? Yeah, uh-huh. It looks like someone is just very slowly giving it a little bit of a pull. Very strange. And then suddenly it just whoosh. Just like that. Unfortunately,
there's no other angle to see it from.
That's a bizarre one, isn't it?
But yeah, a bit creepy. And it did actually, apparently it happened again.
Okay.
A couple of days later when there were some people looking around the bar. They were on the other side of the bar, and the same thing happened again while they were there.
Get back in your cave, Mrs. Deathly. It looks like it's just a black square, like you've just been engulfed by the darkness.
Here I am.
Try the absolute darkness.
I went to have a look because, as you probably realised, there's a bit of a delay between the live video and...
It's quite a complicated thing to do this. It is. You think it would be a lot easier to run something. Ollington Gilbert says, was the plastic still there?
Yes, the plastic was still there and it got put back in the exact same place.
So the plastic was just on the floor?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was there with the cup on the floor.
It almost seems to me like, you know, when a magician tries to pull a a cloth out from
A
underneath.
tablecloth,
like a clear whoosh.
without moving anything.
Because it slowly goes, and then suddenly, whoomph, and it just flies off, doesn't it? Like something gives it an almighty pull. That's so
But
strange.
I should also say, that was like in the early hours of the morning that it happened. Like 3 a.m. when there was nobody there.
So before we go
There were no windows
into
open.
the audience stories, what I find interesting is that the building it's in is the Odeon, the old Odeon Cinema, which is now the Everyman of York. It was a real cinema for a while, and it began its life in the 1930s, and it was. Let me just find my buttons here so I can just give Mrs. Deathley a bit of privacy while she starts banning people.
Thank you.
It was an Odeon cinema in the 1930s, and there's a story of the Odeon down in Bristol that in the 1940s one of the projectionists sadly took their own life in the projection house, and this kind of, there were many reports around Odeon cinemas around the UK, which was the most popular cinema chain. Now, when cinemas first opened, they were like large grand theatre houses, and it was one large screen. It wasn't until the idea of a multiplex, with 1, 2, 3, 4 different screens moved around. Mary Sample says, could it have been a rat that pulled it? No, I'd say no, to be honest, because
100% not
it's
a
an
rat.
Incredibly hygienic building.
Yeah, there's a lot of health and safety.
Lots of health and safety. They take it very seriously. I think the chance of a rat getting in there and pulling on something is good. I mean, it could just be that it just over time something had shifted or a bit of wind had got. I don't know. But it's just bloody weird. Now, you know me. If you've watched the last Tales from the Fireside episode, you know that I like to debunk stuff. I like to kind of pull things apart and go, it's probably not real. It's probably this. And even when we had a strange incident on one of our tours, I wanted to make sure that I kind of got to the bottom of what it was. That's just a really weird one. It's the way that there's no weight to it. That's the strange thing. It's just a very thin piece of plastic sheeting. It's not like a heavy PVC tarp or anything like that. It's just like that kind of thin stuff you can get from the Poundland. And it's got the cup on it. And that should be more than enough to weigh down. It's the way it goes, slowly kind of goes 1, 2, and then suddenly whoosh, and it's gone. That's the strangest thing.
But it's over time as well, because as you can see in the video,
it's time-lapsed.
It was being skipped forward by the person that was watching it.
Something heavy rumbled past outside. Now, am I right to think it was in the upstairs kitchen?
On upstairs bar.
Upstairs bar, okay. That's far back from the main road, and it's a big, solid building. So you've got maybe...
Yeah, you definitely can't feel when things go by.
No,
outside.
you've got maybe 20, 30 feet from that point in the kitchen to the road. Mm-hmm. And even then, like, York's not very wobbly.
Honestly, it's very noisy on that road.
It's a noisy road, but when you're in there, we often go to pub quizzes in the cinema, and it's just a very peculiar one. And it was sent to us, and they said, share it. So anyway, without further ado, we're going to begin now our first tales. Happily, it looks like we've managed to catch most of the grim spanny people. Normally we have Dolores looking after these things, but I won't lie, in the madness of the last week launching the walking tours and whatnot, I completely forgot to book her in for tonight. So she's in the building somewhere. You just can't surprise her. Because, she gets a bit feral and she bites. So we're just going to have to look after her ourselves tonight. Now, tonight we're going to be sharing some stories, some first-hand encounters. Mrs. D will be keeping an eye on the comments now as we move in. I'm going to turn the comments off for a second just so I can focus on these stories. Is it okay, Mrs. D?
Please do.
Thank you very much. And our first tale tonight was sent in by Margaret Breen, and it is her own experience. I have here, Margaret sent in a collection of wonderful stories, and after much pondering, I, myself, have settled on this one as it rang oddly familiar to me after our visit a couple of weeks ago, last week actually, to the Antique Centre. So all the stories I'm going to read tonight are written in their own words. I haven't tweaked them much. I might have just taken out a few words here and there to allow myself to read it a little smoother. But aside from that, off we go. Margaret Breen, own experience. A friend of mine wanted to go and view some houses as they wanted to move, but her husband was working away at the time. So she asked if I could accompany her, as she didn't like to go on her own. We could have a nice catch-up anyway. We looked around a few houses, some she liked and some she didn't. When we got to the fourth house, it was a pretty terraced building with flowers by the door, so we both traipsed inside to have a look. The house had a long, narrow hallway leading to a kitchen at the back of the house with stairs to the next floor halfway down the hall. As I reached the foot of the stairs, I was overwhelmed with an irrational fear, as if my life was in danger. I couldn't understand it. I said I felt unwell, and I needed to be out of this building, to be by the front door if she needed me. And as soon as I left the spot, the fear drained away immediately. My friend had a good look around the house, then we went back to the estate agents together, where they asked how she got on and if she liked any of the houses. She chatted about each house and her opinion of each, asking me for comments from time to time. However, when she came to talk about the last house, she said that she had looked around on her own as I suddenly came over ill after just entering and had to go outside, but wasn't keen on the house anyway. At this point, the estate agent looked at me and asked if I was okay. I told him that as I got to the foot of the stairs, I had come over very strange and had wanted to get out of the house immediately. My friend laughed at the idea, but the estate agent remained silent, which my friend realised after a while and asked why. The estate agent said that they were selling the house as the man who owned it was going to be in prison for a very, very long time, and his wife was no longer around, and the family wanted the house sold. My friend asked why the man was in prison. The estate agent replied he was in prison for murder, the murder of his wife, who he had stabbed several times at the foot of the stairs. Neither of us heard about the murder, as it was some distance away and it had not made TV news. And Margaret went on to add that over the years she's had familiar experiences like this, and she has indeed come to believe over the years that she is clairsentient. This is where you stand in a spot or an area or a house, or you touch something and you get a feeling or an emotion of it. And this puts us in mind of how we felt in the front room of the vintage shop. Do you remember, Mrs. D, when we popped downstairs into the room where the vintage clothing was?
Mm-hmm, yeah. Oh, this is all...
Is it making you...
It made me shiver. Ooh.
So there was a front room in there where the clothing was,
yeah,
and
in the basement.
It was a very odd feeling of there's a pressure in there, wasn't there? That was the strange thing. It was so that
it felt like that you were being pushed in on, like or trying to be pushed out.
So there was there's the story in the antique centre of the young girl who fell down the stairs, but it said that she on the ground floor is where she landed and died tragically. But it's strange. It's in the basement where the feeling for you was the most present. Yeah. And it was an odd sensation. I know what you mean. I didn't feel very...
I'm in the basement right now.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I felt very strange in there. This is a reasonably splendid basement, though. It's quite pleasant in here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite nice. It's quite nice. But thank you, Margaret, for sending that in. Much appreciated. The next story is one that a chap sent in to me, Paul Bulmer. He sent it in to me very early on when we started doing these, and in the hectic nature of how this has all evolved over the last few months, I actually completely forgot to read it. Bless him. He tuned in one night to watch it, and I had actually said I was going to read it out loud, and then I didn't, and I've kind of felt a bit bad for that ever since. So hopefully I'm going to make it up for it now. Paul sent us in this story, which he says is all true and as accurate as he can remember it. The following words are his own. So we're taking you back now to 1976, 44 years ago. I was 10 years old and in a boys' home in Wetherby called Inghamthorpe Hall. To describe it, the hall was set back from the main road opposite Wetherby Racecourse. The driveway was a mile long, winding through the fields. The main door to the building was very grand, with old latch lock types. The main entrance led on to a grand staircase in a square-type spiral, with dormitories leading off the staircase on every level that spanned 3 or 4 floors. Sounds a bit Hogsworthy. Hogsworthy, a bit Hogwartsy. Hogwartsy, I got there in the end. When I first attended the school, on an evening, you could hear the big latch locks from the entrance unlock, and then footsteps would be heard up the winding stairs. Each floor had a main door that led to another corridor where 3 or 4 dormitories were on each floor. The boys used to say, "It's the Grey Lady." There she is again. The Grey Lady popping up in stories and tales that have been passed down. Many boys claim to have seen her, but almost everyone had just heard the footsteps. Then one night, after a trip to the toilet, I heard the footsteps. I heard a door open and close. The corridor that I was standing in suddenly became very cold, and there she was, the outline of a lady's dress and old hat. It wasn't as clear as complete as you would expect, and she appeared to walk through me. I felt icy cold all over, and as it passed, it became a sort of warmth over my body. Now, as I got older, my dorm changed from first floor to top, last window on the right at the top. Now, we have a picture of the building here, actually. Let me just find it. There we go. So just one more time. As I got older, my dorm changed from the first floor to the top. You can see the last window on the right. So I'm assuming he must mean the one just there to the left of the trees, the top right corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The one to the furthest right. From that window, you could see the fields, the race course for miles around. On an evening, you could more or less time most nights when you would make out the picture-perfect outline of a woman coming over the fields. Then, as she got close, she would disappear for a small time. And then again, on previous nights, you would hear the locks turning, the big door clatter, then the footsteps up the big winding steps. This seemed to happen most nights. I was a resident of this school, this home, for 2.5 years. And my friends and I witnessed this on a daily basis, weekly basis. It wasn't that industrious. Far from my first encounter where I was really scared, it just became like a familiar face coming to visit. That's interesting. That's a very interesting one. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Can I imagine?
Like, if something like that happened so regularly that you would get used to it?
Yeah. Yeah. This actually, when the very first episode of The Fireplace that we did, and I talked about how when I was younger, I lived in a Victorian house in Scarborough with my mum and my younger brother. And we had this image of an outline of a figure that would walk past the front bay window every single night almost. And it got to a point where you used to get up and investigate, that was the thing. So before someone would knock on the door, you would see the figure walk past the window, and then you'd wait for the doorbell.
What?
Have I not told you this before?
I don't think
you don't remember.
Have.
I definitely talked about it. Who remembers me talking about this in a previous episode of The Fireplace? So,
classic Mrs. Deathly.
Classic Mrs. Mrs. D is actually part human, part goldfish. She immediately forgets. I have to remind her every morning that I am her husband, Mr. Deathly. She normally wakes up screaming, "Who are you and what are you?"
That's one thing I can never forget.
She's like, "Why are you making toast in your underpants in my kitchen? Get out! I'm going to call the police." But yeah, in a nutshell, I lived in an old Victorian house on Park Avenue, Oak Road, top of Scarborough, next to massive Fosgrove Park. And to get up to the house, you had to walk up a set of stone steps, turn right, walk past the bay window, and there was the front door. So when we were sat in the living room on a night, you would always see the shadow walk past the window, and then there would be the knock. Now, 9 out of 10 times, you would see the shadow walk past the window, and there would be no knock. And it got to the point where we just stop getting up, because you'd see people used to be startled.
They remember.
If we got like some takeaway delivered, we'd see the window and then we'd open the door. They'd literally be there like, "Oh, how did you know I was here?" And we'd be like, "Ha ha ha."
Was it someone delivering a local paper?
Well, no, because there'd be nothing there. There'd be nothing to the letterbox. There'd be a knock at the door. There'd be nothing.
Oh,
Unless they were just coming to the house, stroking our front door for luck, and then leaving.
yes, that is weird.
And Ollington Gilbert. Some spirits residual do the same thing every time. Normally refer to death echoes.
Oh,
or
yeah,
shades.
okay, I've heard that before, yeah.
You're a shade of your former self, and you are echoing an instance within your life. So there is a story of young Jeremy of the Golden Fleece here in York. He was sadly run over by a runaway horse at the bottom of the shambles in the 1800s, and he stands in one of the windows of the Golden Fleece, and he just stares down at the point where his life was tragically extinguished. Similar in fashion to the Grey Lady that was stalking poor old Paul Plummer.
Oh, shivers again.
So let's move on to the next story. So the next story is a slightly stylized one from Deborah Contessa. Thank you very much. Now, Deborah wrote to us a few months ago now and wanted to share us this terrifying tale that she says truly happened to her around 5 years ago. It reawakened her love of the paranormal and prompted her to start writing again. She says it's a bit hyperbolic, as is her style, and she thinks our delivery will do it justice, and she would love to hear it featured on Tales from the Fireplace.
She'd love to hear your silky brown tones.
My silky brown tones. Well, guess what? Guess what, Deborah? It's time. So here we go. So this is a true occurrence, but it has been stylized slightly like a short piece of writing, which I'm a huge fan of. And then, of course, later on tonight, we are going to be reading you an actual short story written by one of our listeners, which I'm very excited about. Ruminating on my tasks for the day, I somewhat wistfully peered out of the bus window, observing pedestrians, encumbered with bulging shopping bags, hurriedly heading home to peel parsnips, roast chestnuts, and wrap last-minute treasures in gaudy paper before safely ensconcing them beneath their Christmas trees. I sighed at the thought of the labour ahead of me, for although it was only shopping, I envied those who were done with such undertakings. Taking in the sights of festively decorated windows, behind which stood proud conifers adorned with multicoloured baubles and vibrant fairy lights, I longed to be finished for the day, spending done, food refrigerated, gifts swathed in tissue and ribbons. The bus slowed to a stop to allow more passengers to alight, and my attention was suddenly caught by a familiar figure. Inside a tanning salon, I spied Stacy, an old friend from my youth. I marvelled to myself about how fantastic she looked, her coal black hair, expertly coiffured into unswept spikes, her still slim and girlish physique encased in leather and lace, and a stack of silver bangles glistening on both of her bone-white slender wrists. Now, back in the day, we had both competed to be the queen of the goth scene, and although on that particular day Stacy would have won hands down, I couldn't help but giggle to myself. A goth with a tan? What was she thinking? No self-respecting goth would be seen dead in a tanning salon, surely. Continuing on my journey, I couldn't help but muse on the sighting of my friend. The years hadn't treated me too badly, but she looked like a total knockout. She didn't seem to have aged at all. Later that evening, my chores complete, I mentioned the encounter to my fiancé. He laughingly suggested she had discovered the elixir of youth, and I had to agree with him. In a subsequent phone call to a mutual friend, I discussed the experience at some length, bemoaning the fact of the passing years as together we pondered what Stacy's secret could possibly be. And just as I was intending to retire for the night, my phone beeped shrilly, indicating a late-night text from my aforementioned pal. Rather ominously, the message read, "Check Facebook." Thinking she could only be referring to our earlier conversation, I logged in and tentatively typed Stacy's full name in the search bar. Upon reaching her page, I read the most current post, and my blood ran cold. It was a heartfelt message from her beloved husband, lamenting the sad passage of his beautiful wife, who had been cruelly taken from him by cancer. It seemed she had been ill for some time and had lost her battle with the dreadful disease only the day before. As I brooded on this tragic state of affairs, experiencing the bittersweet remembrance of our friendship and epic nights out together, an unexpected recollection hit me like a bolt from the blue. Sunday's tanning salon had previously been an insurance broker's with a cosy flat above, a flat where Stacy and her then-boyfriend Michael had resided for a time. A place where we had all shared some fabulous times and made some very wonderful memories. So I think you don't remember that's genuinely something that happened. Even though it was written in a very beautiful and smooth way, that is something that happened to Deborah on that bus
Deborah.
5 years ago.
That made me a little bit sad.
It was a little, it's a very sort of melancholic to it.
Beautiful as well. A beautiful story.
So it puts me in mind of one of the stories from York that I tell on the tour of the. I mean, I'm assuming from that story that the friend passed away around about the same time as she was cited. If it was a recent post, it was obviously the crossover wasn't that long.
Yeah.
So there's a story in York from the 1920s of a girl who's visiting, and she's in a tour party, and when she stood at the steps of the minster, she meets a gentleman who she recognises, and he tells her there is a future state. It's the only thing he says. There is a future state before walking away. And a few weeks later, the letter comes from the Royal Navy saying how her brother has died overseas, and she remembers the man's face, and she knows immediately where she recognised it from. She becomes obsessed with the idea that it was actually her brother's face, yet several decades older than the last time they saw each other. They had made a promise when they were younger that whoever passed away first would come back from the other side and let the other one know if there was a life after death, if there was indeed a future state. I hear about this a lot of times. At the moment of passing, there is a fleeting moment where a spirit will return just to kind of tidy up a last little bit of unfinished business. And I wonder if that's what was going on.
I really like that thought. Yeah,
I do very much.
so.
I like the idea that at the very end of it, you will get a fleeting moment
A little
to
chance.
just pop back and
And
just
Deborah's
rectify.
getting a lot of love for her story.
And rightly so.
Very nice.
Yes, thank you so much for sending it in. Very much appreciated.
And you read it so well
Thank you very much.
with your beautiful silk.
Moving on to our next story. Catherine Swainson, own experience with picture. Oh, lovely. So, Catherine Swainson from Middlesbrough got in touch through Facebook to share a very spooky tale. I'll just get Mrs. Deathy a little bit of privacy. She wants to pick her nose or something. You never know. Maybe something crusty lurking up there. A while ago now, back in 2005, Catherine went away on business for a few days. And the day she returned, her neighbour stopped her in the street before she went in the house and said that she might want to go inside with care. Why would that be? Catherine asked, and was told what had happened while they had been away. At around 3 a.m. a few nights previously, her neighbour heard loud banging and clattering noises from the house, enough to wake them up from their sleep. It sounded like someone was opening and shutting the cupboards and drawers repeatedly. They thought Catherine's home was being ransacked, as they knew she was away, so the neighbour's husband climbed over the fence and waited to challenge the presumed burglars while his wife rang the police and waited at the gate of the front door. The noises stopped. The neighbours waited and waited, but nobody came out of the house. The police came, and after having been unable to see anything unusual and with no signs of forced entry, they left, assuming they had had their time wasted. Upon Catherine's return, having been cautioned by her neighbour, she entered her home expecting the worst, but nothing was amiss. She thought it was odd, but presumed they were simply mistaken. Her neighbours were not usually upset or quick to suspicion, but they had seemed very unnerved by it all. A few weeks passed. It was a Saturday, late morning. Catherine was in the dining room and became aware of someone clattering pots and pans in the kitchen. She remembers shouting at her visiting grown-up daughter to be careful, you're going to break something. What's the hurry? She heard no reply. So she approached the kitchen, but her daughter wasn't in there and promptly appeared from behind her as she looked in the room. What's with the noise, ma'am? She said. Why are you wrecking half the kitchen pots? It wasn't me, I said. I thought it was you. They went further into the kitchen, and as they approached a nearby dresser unit, they noticed that all the doors were open along with 2 kitchen cupboard doors. They hunted the kitchen, looking for an explanation, suspecting maybe a cat had got in. But for what could have caused all the noises and disruption, nothing was to be seen. It was then that Catherine remembered the burglar incident from a few weeks earlier. Spooky. We're told the noises came back from time to time throughout the years, never with any explanation, but Catherine claims to once have accidentally taken a picture of what appears to be a person in her kitchen when testing a new flash on her phone, and we have this photo for you here somewhere. I think it's there we go. So this is a tricky one to see. Obviously, it's been cropped and zoomed in.
So I should say this picture that we've got on now was sent to us. I have enhanced the picture so you can see more clearly what I think we're looking at. And actually, the picture that was sent was it Catherine that sent it?
Yes, this is Catherine.
She said that her friend had drawn on this
Yes, there's the
picture to
lines
show
around
where
the
she
image.
thought she could see the weird thing.
I'm going a little bit closer.
What do you think it looks like, Dorian? Because I think it's a man with a hat on.
It does. I mean, I've punched into the closer image there, and this is one of those photographs where it's a tricky one because it could be a number of things, and to me, I immediately see there around the white line that someone's drawn in, and then the black line there. It's almost like there's a pointing arm, and then there's it almost looks like a smiling man with a sort of pork pie, like a gumshoe detective's hat on. Likely perhaps a reflection in the glass, condensation, anything, perhaps something more sinister. It's one of those ones that you'll never really know about. The thing about phone technology and cameras, that they're not the sharpest. For those that don't know, I am a photographer when I'm not being the spooky half of my personality. And the phones on cameras, they don't have the quickest shutter speed, which is the moment that the camera is open in a fashion to capture the image. The shutter speed, the quicker it is, the sharper it is. So if you see like a fast moving image that's been captured very quickly, I mean, it's a very high, fast shutter speed. Phones don't tend to have them. They sort of try to compensate more by letting light in, which is why phone images are often quite blurry and on low light can be difficult to distinguish. But enough science about it. At the end of the day, you see what you want to see.
And I agree with Sharon Jones. I can see a cat as well.
A cat? I'm going back in. A cat?
It looks a bit like our cat, Ripley.
I cannot see a
little
cat.
White eyes.
I can't see a cat.
I'm very sorry.
I can see a man in a hat. Nonsense. Cat-related nonsense.
Yeah, it's funny what you can see when you're looking, isn't it?
It's the imagination.
If you just saw that.
It's tough to
I mean,
sort of
if
call out.
Catherine hadn't have had strange goings on in her kitchen when she came back across this picture of her.
Well, hopefully it's all settled down.
Flash, I wonder if she would have
Hopefully it's all calmed down a bit now.
seen it.
We're going to move on now to Kirsty Lawler's story, and this is an experience had by her grandfather. Now, we had a message from Kirsty Lawler who wanted to tell us about something that happened to her late granddad. John Watson was his name, although the abundance of men called John at the time meant he was known as Jock to his friends. To provide some context, Kirsty tells us, my granddad was in the RAF for some time in his youth and afterwards spent the rest of his career working as a prison officer in Scotland. He was very much a no-nonsense and sensible sort of man, and as such I was very shocked when he told me he absolutely believed in ghosts. We were very close, and he would share many stories of his life, but the ghost story he told me will always stick to me. John had been working in a prison at the time, and during his break took a stroll around the perimeter, usually to have a smoke. On the night in question, he crossed paths with another officer doing a security sweep with a patrol dog. John stopped to have a friendly conversation with the officer for a while, and eventually they both carried on their separate ways. On returning indoors, he came across other officers who normally patrolled the site, all sitting together in the mess hall. He went over and commented to them in a joking way. That's a bit unfair. You're all in here enjoying yourselves while your mate is out there alone. They all looked at him confused before telling him there was no one out on patrol at the moment, and all the officers on this kind of duty were present at the table. John assumed they were joking with him, but he gave them quite a description of the man he'd spoken to. They were all quite pale at this revelation, and insisted again that there was no one on patrol. A day or so later, John was called to see his supervising officer. The supervisor had been informed about his meeting with the unknown officer outside and asked him to provide a full description of the man and the dog. He did, as he was asked, and he was at this time feeling quite annoyed that such a fuss was being made. When the supervisor heard the description given, he produced an identity photograph of a man and one of a working dog. John, a little relieved upon seeing a familiar face, immediately recognized them as the man and the dog he had seen that night, and he told his supervisor this. His response was met with a grim expression, and the supervisor advised him that the man and the dog in the pictures had disappeared without a trace some years ago, even before John had begun to work at the prison. A statement was taken from John confirming the identity of the man and the dog, where exactly he had seen them, but the officer and his dog were not seen again during the time he worked there. Kirsty tells us her granddad did mention, however, that after the event, officers had to change their normal patrol route as no dogs would go anywhere near the site where the encounter had taken place. Oh, I like that one.
I like that one as well.
I like that one.
And I just want to say as well, I spoke to Kirsty yesterday, and she said that she was hoping to send this up to her family so that her grandma could listen to you read the story as well.
Fantastic.
But she was saying that at the prison where her granddad used to work, there were some other weird things that happened as well. Like there was a cell, and if anyone went in that cell, they were unhappy about it. And there's somebody once saw a lady I think it was a lady on a penny farthing cycling towards their cell.
Oh, I love it.
Don't
I
like
love
that.
it.
Oh,
So obviously cats and dogs, animals have a strange sense of these things, and obviously I'm realising I'm in danger of running over on the show tonight. Obviously we run these at like about an hour and 20, and I'm only halfway through the stories that we have, so I'll speed up a little bit.
I don't think people will mind.
But it reminds me of Stonegate. So this is I'm trying to avoid stories that I tell on my tour, because obviously I want you all to come and join my tour, my new tour in the city of York. But this is one that's a little further down Stonegate, which we do visit on the tour, but we don't go this further down. Around the back of Stonegate, in the 1980s, they were renovating some houses, and the fella that owned the house commented that there was a staircase that no animals would ever go up. Like cats would run playfully towards it and then suddenly stop, hiss, do that weird sort of sideways walk that cats do. Dogs would bark and yap and make all kinds of growling sounds towards the staircase. Now, when they renovated the building and they actually pulled the staircase out, they discovered a human skull tucked away in the cobwebs and the dirt, and they removed the skull. It was taken away to be, try to identify whatnot. They had no idea who this skull belonged to, and after that, the animals were bouncing up and down the staircase quite happily. There was no way they would have known there was a skull underneath the stairs. There's no way, but they just knew there was something not right about that staircase.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Creepy.
Excellent. We're going to move on to the next story. This is own experience sent in by Jessica McDonough. Jessica McDonough.
Oh, just a sec, Dorian.
Okay.
David Michael Ward wants to say, as long as he's in bed for 12, take as long as you like.
Oh yeah, I'm like a gremlin. If I stay up after 12, all these little small Dorian deathly start firing up my back fat.
As you were.
When I was younger, says Jessica McDonough, my mum suffered with migraines, and when she had them, she would go downstairs, sleep on the sofa with the TV on quietly. One night when I was young, maybe 8 or 9, I remember waking up and it was pitch black. I've always been scared of staring into the dark in case someone looks back. My sister always spoke about seeing ghosts, and as a kid I loved Most Haunted, but I had to watch it recorded on video at 7 in the morning with the curtains open and my cat with me. That night I woke up with a jolt. I sat up in bed and I could hear the TV on downstairs, but the house was pitch black. It must have been around 3 in the morning. I knew it would be my mum with a migraine, and I thought I would go and check on her. So I got out of bed, and without putting on the lights, I walked across the landing. As I walked, I could hear, as clear as day, a news broadcast on the TV downstairs in the living room. The volume wasn't up full blast, but as though you would have it on for background noise when you're ill. It had all the inflections you would hear from a news broadcast. I walked down the stairs, and the further down the dark I got, the more I felt hesitant to continue. But I carried on down the stairs thinking I would check on my mum. I could still hear the news on the TV very clearly, which was reassuring as I kept thinking, it's only my mum in the living room, it's fine. In the dark, I peered over the banister to see the living room door closed. This is odd, as normally if my mum was in it, it would be left slightly open. She would have had to turn off the burglar alarm too. My gut feeling of unease intensified, but I could still hear the news broadcast. I was feeling brave, and for some unknown reason I peered over the banister, looking down to the dark corridor to the dark kitchen. Nothing was there but shadows and darkness. My hands were clammy now, but I slowly went into the living room door. I pushed down on the handle to open it, and when I opened the door, silence. The news report that I heard clear as day was no more. There was no noise. The room was pitch black. No one was there. I felt the urge to get out quickly. I ran back upstairs and hid under my duvet, terrified of what had happened. Now, Mrs. Deathley asked what her mum had to say about this when she found out, and Jess says she wasn't too surprised. Apparently, my dad and my sister could always see ghosts. My sister in the house has told me of many horrible things, and when she was very young, she once saw an old man walk towards her from a wardrobe at night, looking at her, and she had to shout at him to go away. What? That was horrible. That was horrible.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not a big fan of that one. Oh my goodness me. That was very well written. It was I like the I felt like myself. I felt like I was descending into the darkness there.
Yeah. Oh, how have our lovely people lived through all these terrifying experiences?
You say you spoke to Jessica. Did you say that? Did she say how she was interested? How was she feeling at the time?
Oh, do you know what? I did speak to her. She didn't say how she's feeling at the time.
I mean, go on. Sorry, go on.
She did. I don't know if I wrote it on there, actually. I'm really sorry, but I wasn't paying attention because I was answering someone's question. But she did. I did ask what her mum...
Yes, I read that out. Yeah,
yeah.
I
asked what her mum thought about it.
She said about the
I didn't. I don't know. Maybe she's watching tonight. Maybe she can tell us what she felt when it happened.
This is in no way a supernatural one, this one, but I once so when I say I was growing up in the house in Scarborough, we had a flat attached to the back of the house, and it had a tenant in it now and again, and then after a while it was empty, and I've been a 16-year-old boy was kind of, can I move into the flat? And my mum said, of course you can, that's fine. So I moved into this little annex flat at 16 years old, feeling very independent. I mean, my mum still cooked all my meals and did my washing for me, but that's not the point. I lived in my own flat as far as I was concerned. And one weekend I got very ill. I got a weird sort of flu, buggy chest infection, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was very confused about what was going on, and I heard noises coming from my bedroom, and I opened my bedroom door, and this sounds exaggerated, but it's the absolute truth. Where the rectangle of the door was, I was in space. I was literally, as far as I was concerned, I was stood looking into space, and then a big spaceship went flying by.
No.
But obviously, I was ill. I was feverish. I was dreaming.
It's like a fever dream.
Yeah, and I remember staying with me. And then the next night, I'm going to tell the story. It's quite embarrassing. I walked around the house to where my mum was, and I opened the living room door, and I was balls naked.
Oh no!
And you know what I did? I had a wee.
Oh, Dorian.
I was very ill, apparently, and it turned out in the end I actually had glandular fever.
Oh.
And I was wiped out for like a long time. Yeah, I had no idea. I walked in, and my mum was like, obviously, complete stark bum naked Dorian, and I just went hello, and I just had a little bit of a wee in the corner. So there you go. Growing up with me as a child was great fun. You won't hear that story on the tour, let me tell you. So we're moving on now to...
I just want to tell you something that's come up in the comments. Firstly, a couple of other people, so you mentioned your house in Falsgrave.
Yes.
A couple of other people have lived in Falsgrave and said that they've had experiences before they knew that you was in Falsgrave.
So we're doing a haunted After Dark tour of York next weekend, and in a few weekends after that, we're going to do an After Dark tour of Scarborough, my hometown. I'm doing the research at the moment, putting the tour together, and we will see where we go. We'll see where we end up. Maybe we'll end up in Falsgrave. Maybe we'll go to my old house, stand outside it. That'd be hilarious.
God,
shouldn't, because then people would be like,
what would you do if you saw someone walking past the window and knocking on the door?
Oh my God, what if it's me? What if one of those,
What it's you in the future?
It's me in the future, like I've gone back and...
What have you done?
There's a whole episode to be done here. Let's not talk about that now. Okay, I need to crack on.
Close it down.
Here we go. So this, my friends, is a written story that has been sent in, and the writer, the author, has asked to be left anonymous, which I do think is a shame, because I think it's a fantastic story. If you've watched one of these shows before, you'll know that I often read out a short Victorian ghost story, but this is a brand new story. And I assume that aside from the person who wrote it, and aside from me and Mrs. Deathley, nobody else has ever really heard of it. So here we go. Enjoy. I shrugged my rucksack higher up on my shoulders and peered once again at the scrap of paper pinned to the map, containing the address of the farmhouse due to put me up for the night. I was nearing the end of my second day of walking, following an ancient pilgrimage route through the wilds of Northumbria as part of my doctoral research. The expedition had been organised with the help and funding of the British Pilgrimage Trust, and it was them who had arranged where I would be sleeping each night, a combination of lodging with people and camping in various churchyards and farmers' fields. Tonight's address was an isolated farmhouse a mile or two off the trail. It had been half an hour since I'd branched off the route in what should have been the direction of the farmhouse. The sun was rapidly setting, and so far there was no buildings in sight. Soon it was fully dark, the last vestiges of daylight being swiftly sucked over the horizon. I had no signal on my phone, and on the verge of panic I was despairingly starting to work out the safest route to spend the night in the rugged wilderness and not die of exposure. Then I saw it. Just as I reached the brow of the hill, huddled in sheltered valley, was the most beautiful view I'd seen all day. The dark, bulky shape of a farmhouse was picked out from the surrounding blackness by the thin light of the rising crescent moon, soft yellow light glowing out from the windows. Spurred on by a surge of relief, I was knocking on the door in under 10 minutes. It was opened by a short woman, her dark hair streaked with grey, wearing an apron over her long brown dress. She stared at me with a sense of stern surprise. I guess I might not look like your average pilgrim, and perhaps my late arrival meant they'd assumed I wasn't coming. And once I introduced myself as a traveller along the pilgrimage trail, and that I must have got lost, she softened slightly, introduced herself as Mrs. Temperton, and invited me into the house. The falling temperature of the night air outside sent a chill down my spine as I crossed the threshold. I'd stepped into an open, airy kitchen, very traditional and basic in keeping with the old structure of the farmhouse. A fire blazed in the open hearth, providing the main light source in a room otherwise lit with candles. There was no sign of any modern appliances, perhaps one of the drawbacks of living in such a remote, isolated spot. The woman sat me down at the scrubbed wooden table that dominated the room and busied herself at the hearth, ladling out a stew from a pot that hung over the fire. She put the bowl in front of me, adding a spoon, a cup of water, and a hunk of bread before sitting down opposite. Whilst I ate, she told me how long it had been since it had a guest, and how few travellers came by anymore, yet she always kept a room ready just in case. Sounds of children playing could be heard from another part of the house, and the heavy footsteps of Mr. Temperton stomped about upstairs. Mrs. Temperton, or Martha, she told me to call her once we were sat drinking tea by the fire, seemed reluctant to talk about herself or her family. But I got the impression she had quite a lot of children, and they were used to running wild across the valley whilst their parents were busy running the farm. Having been fed, I quickly sank into a sleepy stupor. Food eaten and tea drunk, Martha showed me to my bed for the night, a tiny room barely bigger than a cupboard, just down the corridor from the kitchen, with just enough room for a single bed and a washstand. She then led me through the next door down, back outside and along a path to the toilet, an alarmingly basic affair. When I returned to my room, someone, presumably Martha, had left a jug of water on the washstand. The whole setup felt very antiquated. The added historicity of it gave me an especially nerdy thrill as I collapsed onto the small wooden bed. That night I slept like the dead, exhausted from the day's walking, and awoke to the bleeping of my watch alarm at 5 a.m. the next morning. I silenced it without opening my eyes, vaguely aware of the grey dawn light creeping in through the small high window. I lay there for a few moments listening to the quiet stillness of the isolated valley. When I did open my eyes, the first thing I saw was a small girl in a white nightdress staring at me from beside the door. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, but when I opened them once more, she was gone. She must have been checking to see if I was awake and had slipped away again. I guessed that she was one of the children I'd heard the night before. There was enough water in the jug to wash up without having to set about bothering Martha or trying to find more. With that nervous sense of apprehension that comes from being in someone else's house and not knowing if they're up themselves, I made my way back down to the kitchen. The sound of footsteps running up and down the stairs suggested that there was more than just the little girl who was up and about already. And sure enough, Martha was in the kitchen, lighting the fire. She insisted on giving me 2 slices of toast, hand-smeared lumps of bread from soot-blackened range, smeared with a rich, creamy butter and tart homemade jam, and a cup of tea before I left, also wrapping up a stout doorstop of cheese in a sheet of newspaper. The occasional sound of children's laughter echoed from somewhere in the house, prompting me to ask her about the little girl I'd seen. A strange look came over Martha's face, as if there was something she couldn't quite remember, before telling me it must have been little Mary, Margaret, in a rather absent-minded manner. Unsettled, I thanked Martha for her hospitality, shouldered my rucksack and headed out, following a path up and out of the valley in what should have been the route back to the trail. And as I emerged, my phone began buzzing furiously as it connected to a small scrap of signal. Missed calls, texts, emails flooded the screen, people demanding to know where I was, if I was okay, and why I hadn't arrived at the farm I was supposed to be staying at. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to reason out what breakdown in communications might have caused such panic, a shiver going down my spine as I sent off messages of reassurance before the elusive signal disappeared once again. Looking back down into the valley, the early morning sun made the farmhouse look much more derelict and abandoned than it had in the dark, or indeed how it had felt from the outside. The morning suddenly felt a lot colder. The feelings of relief and welcome evaporated like the early morning mist, and I quickly put my back to the place and continued on at a much faster speed. Before I rejoined the pilgrim trail, the path led me past the ruined shell of a tiny chapel. I picked my way through the long grass, skirting around the teetering gravestones. Mist still clung to one corner where a single large tombstone loomed. The inscription began with the usual Victorian platitudes before listing an entire family who all appeared to have died on the same day. Thomas Temperton, his loving wife Martha, and their children Alice, Fred, Anne, John, Sarah, and little Mary Margaret. I'm coming for you, Mrs. D. How's about that then, eh?
I bloody love that story. It's so good. It's really atmospheric and chilly.
I did a slight error in the reading. It's a doorstop of a cheese sandwich. I got very excited at the word cheese sandwich, and I panicked. I omitted the word sandwich, but it was not just because it's a bit of an odd thing to give you as a parting gift. Thank you for spending the night. Have a giant wedge of cheese. But a wonderful story, fantastically written, and lovely to read. It was sent over to a couple of weeks ago just to have a little bit of just to enjoy it really, and I sort of demanded. I was like, I can please, can I read this out as part of Tales from the Fireplace? And yeah, was allowed to. So very much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on now to our next own experience. This is from Sarah Brooks with a picture as well.
Love a picture.
When I was in my early 20s, we went to visit a good friend who lived in Warsaw, Poland. It was early March and the tail end of the skiing season in, if I pronounce this wrong, Zakopane? Zakopane.
That's how I would have said it, yeah.
Zakopane.
Sorry, I meant to look that up for you.
Zakopane. That one surprised me. Came at me like a beautiful Hansel and Gretel-like village known for its skiing. It was a spur-of-the-moment trip, and we headed out there with the idea of finding accommodation when we arrived. We went everywhere, but nowhere had any availability. Finally, we found this beautiful old house that we looked like we had dropped off the pages of a fairy tale. We were delighted as they had accommodation and we had somewhere to stay. We were escorted to a converted loft which had 2 ensuite rooms. Nothing eerie at all about them. It looked as though the rooms had been recently renovated. Now, as the rooms were in the loft, the toilet in the ensuite had one of those waste converters which quietly drummed in the background. Our bed was next to the wall. There was a gap at the bottom of the bed which held a chair in the corner. The walls had been recently painted white, but as I lay my head down, I noticed a chip in the paint and the plaster right next to my head. This stayed in my mind as I thought it was a shame, as the room had been obviously and recently renovated. Anyway, we ventured out, had an eventful day skiing and wonderful evening in the local taverns. We even hitched a hilarious ride home in a snowplow. We took the opportunity to stop at a beautiful house which had these fabulous huge icicles hanging for a photo opportunity. This was before the days of camera phones, so we could only see our images on the back of a digital camera. Anyway, we returned to our hotel room exhausted and went to sleep. At some point in the early hours, I awoke suddenly. I am a notoriously heavy sleeper, so this in itself was very strange. From where I was laying in bed, I looked up. Sat sideways at the end of our bed, looking at me, was a young girl who looked around 13 or 14 years old. She had a badly torn, old-fashioned clothing that I would have placed around the 1940s. Her face was extremely dirty. She had grazes across her face, a black eye and a split lip. She had brown hair that appeared matted with leaves and twigs, and upon closer inspection I realised the hair was not matted, it was actually frozen in clumps. I can still see her in my mind now as vividly as I did that night. She had her hands placed gracefully on her lap together, and as she sat sideways and slightly turned towards me, she gave me a really sweet smile. She had an incredibly kind face. The weirdest thing is I wasn't scared, not in the slightest. In fact, I felt incredibly calm. The entire time I could hear the drumming of the toilet in the background, and I smiled back at her, turned my head to face the wall, noticed the chip again, and very calmly and at peace, I went back to sleep. It wasn't until the next morning when I woke up I was really freaked out. I told my husband, he thought I was bonkers. I ran across the hallway and told my friend. She was really unsettled, and I felt like she believed me. At breakfast, she spoke with the hotel owners in Polish and told them about my encounter. I was poised, ready to hear them, what they said. They laughed at her and said, "Yes, that's our ghost. Nothing more." I could still see her so vividly when I got home. I drew her. This really freaked out my friend, and the detail in the drawing even unsettled my husband with its detail. Years later, I was talking to another Polish friend over drinks, and I told him about the encounter. I always wondered about the girl and what had actually happened to her. He regarded me and told me what he thought it might have been. Now, he told me that in the 1940s in Poland, Nazi versions of the Boy Scouts were formed, and these boys were used as spies and informants. They took their duties very seriously and were basically given a free license to do whatever they wanted, causing havoc. They would have been around the same age as this girl would have been, and one of the favourite pastimes was to attack, to beat girls. As soon as he said this to me, I knew this was what happened with complete certainty. I don't know why, I just do. Now, when they returned home, they actually had photographs on their phone. As I said, they were taking photographs. It was a camera before smartphones. The photos were developed, and not only were there orbs on the pictures, but there was one particular photograph taken in front of the hotel, which I'm going to show to you now. Now, you might just think, well, it's just a photo of a chap on a cold night. But this is the interesting thing. There is a mist going across the front of the scene, and Sarah tells us that when the photo was taken, it was a completely clear night. There was no snow or rain, nobody was smoking nearby, there was no mist, there was no fog, and yet you can see there clear as day in the photograph a very happy chap giving us a firm thumbs up, but a thick layer of smoke and mist covering the front of the image. Ooh, over to you, Mrs. D. What do we make of this one?
A couple of orbs in there as well. Do you know what? We've actually had, and I've not been able to fit them all into the show, but we've actually had a lot of similar photos to this, and I imagine there's someone will probably tell us in the comment a name for this kind of effect that happens. I remember somebody recently sent us a picture of that they'd taken outside the little window on College Street, and there was a series of 3 photos just taken,
Yes.
and the middle one just had this weird fog that looked like it was coming from the house. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, so much you just don't,
Yeah.
so much we don't understand. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. It's so easy to sort of go away. It's a bit of mist, a bit of fog, but, you know, maybe.
But when you know the story,
Maybe it's
makes it a
something
bit
else. Yeah, adds a whole new
creepy.
layer to it. All right, we're going to move on to a story now from Robert Payne. Now, Robert has actually shared with us a couple of stories before. We read one out as part of Tales from the Fireside, did we? And I know we definitely read one as
On the podcast.
On the podcast.
It was
Did
on
we
the
read one
podcast.
on Fireside as well? I can't
don't think
remember.
so.
You may remember Robert sent in the story, and it was one that when he was at sea, and it involved the curtain and the feeling that there was somebody moving around the cabin in the ship. Now, also, if you have watched one of the earlier Firesides, when we were debunking things, we were talking about the rake, which was the folklore, the story, so quite a modern one about this feeling of dread, this feeling of irrepressible evil. And this sparked a memory for Robert, and he sent us the following story. So we're going back now to before I went to sea, before I'd left school. My parents had moved us from mid-Lancashire to the Wirral in a rather grand house with 4 large bedrooms and a 5th in a sort of granny annex extension over the double garage, complete with what became my father's study, a bathroom and a shower. Naturally, this became my parents' bedroom. Now, the first night of moving in, I heard strange, discomforting noises, mainly the distinctive sounds of cupboards' doors opening and closing. But not the cupboards of the new house, no, those of the house that we had left. I was so unsettled that my mother slept in my new room while I slept in one of the twin beds in my parents' rooms. Things settled after that first night. There were no more odd noises. However, the extension bathroom was the only bathroom with a shower, so it was used by all of us. Except that I could not go to it without all the lights being on. Up to this point, I had never really had any fear of the dark, but while the house was lovely and we all have good memories of it, it was the only place I ever felt uncomfortable in the darkness, but only upstairs, and most especially within the extension. I would go through an elaborate sequence of switching lights on and off. Dad was very strict about leaving lights on in empty rooms. Don't do it whenever I went for a shower. Other strange things would also happen. When upstairs in the main house, I would frequently feel that I was being watched or followed. To turn and see no one, I would also catch a glimpse of people out the corner of my eye, but not ordinary people. They were around 2 feet tall. As said before, I was the only house where I did not like the dark. I would sleep with the curtains wide open, the door open, the landing light on. It was only years after moving out of that house, when talking about this with my brothers and sister, that my sister disclosed that she had also had the same feelings and the same glimpses. One particular week, during a school holiday, my parents and sister were away, leaving me alone with my 2 brothers. During the week, I became more and more uncomfortable in my room. A lot of it may well have been the usual childish monster under the bed type of fear, except I was 13 or 14 years old. I spent much of the day out of the house on my bike, continually nagged by this oppressive fear that followed me, as if I had company. And it was company that I did not want, a lowering, threatening presence. Nothing was visible, but it was there. The climax was the evening when I lay in bed, curtains wide open, landing lights on, door wide open. My brothers were downstairs watching a comedy show on the television, and the sounds of laughter from the TV audience and my 2 brothers wafted up. Meanwhile, I lay in bed petrified. There was nothing visible, just an overwhelming feeling of an evil presence. I pulled the blanket over my face, which made me even more uncomfortable. How would I see it if it manifested itself and tried to sneak up on me? Eventually, I summoned up the courage to move, to get up, to switch on the bedroom lights and get out of the room. I had read sufficient Dennis Wheatley to know what to do, and scurried into my dad's study to retrieve a Bible, with which I returned to my fully illuminated bedroom. Sitting on the bed, I searched for the passage Dennis Wheatley had recommended as the most effective against evil. Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." I read it through, and I read it aloud, and I read it again. With each reading, the feeling of dread, evil lifted, and I spent some time flicking through the Bible, reading passages that the pages fell open to. All the while, the sense of an evil presence lifted until, suddenly, it was snuffed out like a candle. Needless to say, I slept with the Bible by my bed for that night, and for quite a few nights afterwards, to read passages from it, ready to commit them to memory, as the feeling of an evil presence did return, though not quite as overwhelmingly terrifying as that night, and it eventually ceased altogether before the week was out. However, I was never able to walk to the shower in the dark, and I still saw these small people out of the corner of my eye until we eventually moved away when I was about 20. So whatever that dread was, the evil presence, perhaps the rake of which you spoke, it had nothing to do with these other experiences. Coming at you, Mrs. D. That's a heavy one, right?
I love it.
That's a heavy one.
Yeah. We've had some really good stories tonight.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
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 Some people were meant to write stories, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Richard's stories are quite fantastic. I think that's the 3rd one he sent to us now. Actually,
that was not Richard's.
That was Robert's. Robert. Sorry, I apologise. It was, I think that's 4 stories he sent to us now. We'll read the other one that was attached to that story as part of the next podcast. Now, you might have noticed, normally we put podcasts out on a Sunday night. We're not going to be doing that anymore. We're going to be putting them out on midweek. Because obviously we're now doing a live tour or a live stream of the fireplace every single Sunday night. The idea now is that since departing departing the bus, it sort of returned in a rather peculiar manner. I decided it was definitely time to go. I am now basically doing the tours in York Friday and Saturday. 8 o'clock from Grape Lane, shameless plug, in which you can join me for 90 minutes of real inhuman presence, ghostly stories. Tickets, of course, from www.doriandeathly.co.uk. Yeah. And then we're going to do this online something every Sunday night because we're aware that a lot of people still aren't comfortable venturing out of their homes into the city of York, which is quite understandable. It's very busy. I think we anticipated that York would be very quiet. They thought 60 to 70% drop off. I think it's close to 10. I think close to 10% on numbers down from last year. It's almost as if nothing is happening.
Not that quiet at all, is it?
It's lunacy. So yes, face masks and gloves all around. Tra-la-la.
I've got a couple of things.
Give them. Slap them in there.
Firstly, I'm very proud of you for doing your tour.
Oh, thanks. Thanks,
Wanted
wife.
to say that.
Thank you very much.
And also, there's three things actually. Richard Payne is happy to take compliments for the story that he didn't write.
Of course.
And a lot of people have said they could hear bells. A lot of people.
When?
Is there possibly bells on your soundtrack?
Maybe if I'll turn this up.
Somebody asked, were they the bells of the Minster or...
I mean, hang on, let me, I can turn up my music when it...
And then everybody started saying, I heard bells too.
I mean, unfortunately, there's no way for me to... That's it quite, it's a bit loud there. There's no real way for me to kind of, to skip through the sound. It's a button and I don't want to bore you with the technology. Maybe I'll do a little video about the technology that we use to make this sound so lovely. But no, I mean, maybe there was some bells in the soundtrack because there are no churches near here that toll bells,
No,
especially
not.
at like 10:09. Yeah, that doesn't really happen there. So we have one final thing to share with you tonight, and it is an image. It is an image, and this was sent in by Rebecca Payne over Facebook to Mrs. Deathley. Now, during lockdown, Rebecca has been looking through some old family photographs. No sentence ever began with that phrase and ended well, did it? She started running them through some online enhancing and colorization software. Whilst enjoying the newly restored images, she became, I love this sentence, she became aware of what she described to Mrs. Deathley as a big old nope. A big old nope. So I'm going to show you the image now. Here we go. So do we know vaguely when this was taken? This is, I'm going to say...
Here's the thing, right?
Early 1900s.
As far as I know, I think Rebecca's brother is in the chat somewhere.
Okay.
They don't know anything about the photo. It's just in a pile of family photos.
So unidentified
Don't know anything
people.
about it. Why it's in their family photos, when it was taken, who's in it.
I'm going to leave it up there for a second and see if anyone can spot what's wrong there. I'm just going to leave it up for a moment and see if... So the picture was, I'm assuming, kind of like that sepia, slightly, you know, like an old photo.
Yeah.
And then this has
so
gone...
nothing's changed about the image other than the colour.
Just the colour and the sharpness has been slightly enhanced.
The cuteness of the dog definitely hasn't changed.
Has
that
remained.
Was cute all the way through.
Lee Halliday, they've seen the big old nope has been spotted. The big old nope has been spotted. Okay, we're going to go. We're going to punch in. Wait for it, friends. Here we go. There he is. Oh, mate.
Nope.
Oh, mate.
Nope.
Look at that.
Nope.
Look,
Nope.
Everyone spotted it.
Nope.
Bloody hell.
Gross. Oh, no. I want to be sick.
Bloody hell, right?
Oh, it's so horrible.
What I love... This
Who did
is...
you say he looks like, Dozza?
I think it looks like a spooky Elijah Wood. Like Elijah Wood has popped back in time.
Okay. A few things.
Oh.
Why is he so pale?
Why is he so pale?
Why is he the only person not wearing a hat?
Yeah, no hat.
Why?
That's the thing. Let's snap back out again, and that's the strange thing. Is if you snap back out, you can see everyone's got a hat on. That's obviously the rule of the photograph. Wear a hat. Wear a hat. Obviously, this whatever this is did not receive the memo to wear a hat. Now, again, in the spirit of clarity and whatnot, he could be pale simply because the colorization software did not detect the face.
I wish I'd have shown you the original because I've got that as well.
Okay.
I dropped the ball here. I'm sorry.
We'll post up about this. No, we'll put it. If Rebecca's all right with it, we'll post all three images. We'll post the original sepia. We'll post the colorized version, and then we'll post the cropped close-up version.
He used the One Ring to get back and photo bomb this picture.
I mean, that's all.
Oh no, and the dog's not wearing a hat.
That is true. You don't know that. That dog might be wearing a hat that is an exact...
Hat made of fur.
It's a fur hat in the same shape as it. Maybe the dog has no ears and has to wear a hat to disguise it.
On this close-up picture.
Go for it.
So the guy on the right, the very right-hand side, is it just me or is there something weird under his ear?
Weird. Oh, we've had someone said, is there something on the under the window on the left?
Okay.
Give me a moment. Let me just see if I can kind of zoom in a bit. Just there. Can you go in a little bit closer?
Stephen, it's definitely not to do with the enhancements because it's 100% on the original picture as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, Stephen. I've seen I think you've shown me the original photo, and he's there on that as well.
And it does remind me of the one behind the family.
What the hell?
What?
Hang on. Oh, I don't like this. Just in the middle pane of glass.
Sorry, and what?
Someone said that they'd seen something in the window on the middle pane of glass.
What is it? What is it?
Oh!
No, what?
Can you not?
Is it like a face?
Oh,
Is it a face you can see?
It's a tiny face.
I don't... Oh.
Can you see it?
It looks like the dog.
I'm sure that's just a face in the window. Margaret's seen it. Oh, Mrs. Deathley's having a cry.
Like
There's that guy there.
my eyes are teary.
Oh no. Hang on, give me a moment. I'm lost in my own gadgets now. Oh, no thanks. Audrey Hepburn.
Very good one.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh.
I can't even. Like this picture is...
We're going to look into this, guys. We're going to get more as we can. So, Tiny Elijah Wood.
I've seen, I recognise the kind of
Spooky
picture,
little face.
in the olden days. They used to have all these big, work pictures, didn't they? Like group pictures.
Yeah.
But
this is very familiar to the one of the airmen. There he is. Look at him. He's not right, is he?
The unusual thing is that it's so
Sweet
clear.
dreams, everyone. Hang on a minute. I'm just going to put some suitable...
Oh no! Don't. Why? I'm on the delay. But why did you have to zoom so close on him? Because that is not very... Oh, the face in the window could be wearing a hat.
Well...
Oh, why are you playing that music?
Well, it's one of those things. There are so many wonderful explanations as to what it could be, but I love that immediately people saw the faces. People saw faces in the window. Now I'll find those and I'll post some images.
Oh
yeah,
God.
that's.
Hold on a second.
Are you okay over there, Mrs.
Just
D?
take the camera off me a sec.
Why? You all right? Oh, hang on. Oh, are you okay? Oh no. I've taken it too far. I've taken it way too far. I'm very sorry. Oh, dear me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that brings us to the end of the Deathly Dark Tales from the Fireplace tonight. You may notice a virtual tip jar down at the bottom, somewhere down there. PayPal.me, Dorian Deathly. If you fancy chipping something in, that would be greatly appreciated. Really, really greatly appreciated. The tours and these things are now the only source of income that I have. And the tours actually have become quite... What's going on? Oh, you idiot.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh.
Happy birthday to you.
Where's my balloon?
Happy birthday.
She was faking it.
Glorious.
Oh, what is this?
Happy birthday to you.
Mrs. Deathly is fine. She was just being a jerk so she could sneak off and get me my birthday muffin. Oh, God, is that really how old I am now?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
But you know what you have to do?
Oh, yeah.
Blow out the candles and make a wish, but don't wish to be younger.
Thanks, love. 40 years old. I'm not happy. My balloon's gone. My balloon's drooped. Oh, welcome back, Mrs. D. Oh, isn't that nice?
Hello.
Oh my gosh. As if
I've had a pen to write on the balloon with, but I forgot it, so I just made it out of electrical tape. I hope that's okay.
I've noticed. Yeah, I've just noticed that now. I wondered why you were in the tape box earlier on. You see that? There we go. Oh, I don't think the light's going to get on it. There we go. Oh, this is how many years old I am now. I am.
And the candles are not edible.
Oh, how have I made it this far? 40th. Oh God, it's real. It's real.
Well, not yet. I mean, it's not your birthday for another few hours.
No,
but...
I've got 2.5 hours left. I've got 2.5 hours left of it. Thanks, love. That was very nice of you. Well, thank you, friends, for joining us tonight. I'm 33 soon. Thanks for that, Ashley.
No one likes a show off.
I mean, I'll swap with you. Somebody today was like, oh my God, I'm 20 now. I can't believe I've just turned 20, and I wanted to punch them in the neck. I was like, oh, that's nice. You're young. Lovely. Happy birthday. Thanks, guys.
I'm just
Thanks,
doing
guys.
a little post in the chat for the
It's been lovely.
the PayPal link, because we didn't do that yet.
Life begins at 40, apparently. Rather ironic. Yeah, wait till you get to your 60s. See, this is the thing. I'm going to gladly accept being in my 60s because I reckon I'm going to have I'm going a little bit grey already. I've got a bit of grey hair in the beard and everything. I reckon I'll be totally grey, and I'm going to aim to be one of them like dapper gentlemen, you know, like always in the 3-piece tweed with the silver beard.
Oh yes,
looking a little bit like
please.
Yeah. Guy Price, 41 in 6 days. How was turning 40? Do your knees cry when you're trying to get? I'm 50 next year. Your bro is 50. No, he's not. That's outrageous. Well, thanks for joining us, friends. Mrs. D, you're still on the camera. Do you want to say anything to everybody? Do you want to?
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the lovely, lovely, scary stories you sent us, and the people that wrote the stories as well, because it's not easy.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's not easy putting down experiences into words, but yeah, I bloody loved all of it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
This is my favourite one yet.
I think haven't you? Because normally we do all the haunted images and we do the all sorts of manic, crazy things. Videos, images, and this one we were a little bit worried about going in because we were like, we're basically going to be talking and reading stuff for a long time.
I mean, we're going to have to do another one now because we've got tens of other stories come through.
If you've sent us more stories, the best way to get them to is if you have any ghostly stories, and particularly ghostly images and videos. We really love ghostly images and videos. We'll be back doing Tales in the Fireplace every second Sunday now. That's the idea. We'll be doing this every fortnight. Next Sunday, we'll be doing one of our last York tours. Now, the reason why we're making the decision not our last one, but a last one for a while, we're not going to do them very frequently, is because I just think that, firstly, I don't want to keep doing the same tour over and over again online. I want to give you something that's new and an interesting thing. That's why we're going to go to Scarborough. We're going to do Whitby. Maybe we'll do Malton. We're going to move around all the Yorkshire towns.
Go for a little
get into places. Trip. Yeah, like we did for the antique centre. Get into places. But yeah, next week is York. We'll be starting at 9 o'clock at night, so it'll be nice and dark and spooky. And then it'll be it'll be a little while before we do one of those again, because we want people to come to York. It's like I'm not the only tour guide in York. There are other tours. There's Shadows of York. There's the Bloody Tour of York. There's the Ghost Bus, which, despite my grievances with the place, is a very good show. The show itself is fantastic and should be enjoyed by everybody. Beverley, Hull. Keep them coming in. We'll always do something. But yeah, it will do. Next week we'll do the York one, and then it'll be a few months before we do another York tour. And for those of you excited by 30 East Drive,
drum roll.
We are going to be going into 30 East Drive in January 2021. It took us that long to get booked in there. It's a very popular place, but we're going to be going big for that one. It won't just be Mrs. D and I, it'll be the entire Deathly tribe. We're going to take in all sorts of gadgets. We'll be posting about that after Halloween. If you want to come to York and join me for a live tour, please do. I had a very busy opening weekend, and obviously now it's a little quieter going forward, but I'm only going to be doing Friday and Saturday night, 8 o'clock from Grape Lane. If you know anyone coming to York, if you ever see anyone going, oh, I'm going to York, what can I possibly do? Tell them
does as way.
Go on Dorian Deathley's Deathly Dark Tour of York, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock every night, every Friday. God, I'm just marketing this right. I'm going to start at 8 o'clock Friday and Saturday nights from Grape Lane. Over the week of Halloween, I'm doing a lot more tours. I'll be doing sort of 8 days straight. So if you want to come to York on Halloween and join me for a late night exploration of some of the most haunted spots in the entire city of York, let's do it. But yeah, paypal.me/Dorian Deathley. I think Mrs. D has posted a link in the chat. Honestly, anything you can chuck our way is very much appreciated. Much love to you all. Thank you for wishing me a very happy birthday. I'm going to take... You won't hear much from us tomorrow. I know I post on the Facebook page quite regularly. We're going to have 24 hours off, I think. So 36 hours. Let's treat ourselves to a day and a half off.
Oh,
and I'll be back on, no doubt, Tuesday night with my usual nonsense ramblings. Good night, friends. Say good night, Mrs. Deathley.
Good night, Mrs. Deathley.
Every time.